My phone rang while I was standing in the break room at work, stirring sugar into coffee I didn't end up drinking. The woman on the line said she was calling from the fraud department at my bank, and that my wife was standing at the counter right now, with a man who looked exactly like me, trying to withdraw $18,000 from our joint account. I set the coffee down so fast it sloshed over my hand, and I didn't feel it. I told her I was 40 minutes away, nowhere near that branch, and asked her to please find a reason to keep them there a little longer without making it obvious. She said there was already a flag on the account that gave her a reason. My name is Daniel Osei. I want to tell you what I found out over the following 2 hours, because a man who looked exactly like me was standing next to my wife at that counter, and by the time I got there, I already understood more of it than I wanted to. Before I go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Now let me take you back 4 months, to the week my wife started acting like someone I didn't fully recognize either. Priya and I had been married 9 years, comfortable in the way marriages get comfortable. Both of us busy, both of us assuming the distance was just a season rather than a direction. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, hours that stretched late into evenings I usually spent catching up on my own work. And neither of us thought much of the growing quiet between us, the kind that fills a house without anyone deciding to put it there. That spring she reconnected with someone from her design program in college, a man named Victor, described to me as an old friend catching up after years apart. She started meeting him for coffee sometimes, mentioned him casually enough that I never thought to ask more, the way you don't ask follow-up questions about someone you've decided is harmless before you've even really considered them. Small things started shifting around the same time. A $1,200 charge on our joint card for something she called a work expense that never quite got explained further when I asked. A brief answer that closed the subject rather than opening it. A new authorized user added to one of our accounts that she said was for tax purposes with her accountant. A name I never verified because verifying it felt like an accusation I wasn't ready to make. She started taking calls in the other room some evenings, phone turned face down on the counter when she came back. Small habits that meant nothing on their own and everything stacked together. I noticed pieces of this and didn't want to see the whole picture. It's easier to explain something away than to ask the question sitting underneath it. The thing that finally moved me from noticing to looking happened 9 days before that phone call. Our neighbor mentioned, in passing, over the fence while I was taking out the trash, that he'd seen me at the hardware store on a Tuesday afternoon buying a ladder, at a time I'd actually been in a client meeting 40 miles away. I laughed it off in the moment, made a joke about having a twin nobody had told me about. Then I went home that night and pulled our credit report quietly at the kitchen table after Priya had gone to bed, and found a second authorized user on our primary checking account I had never approved, added 6 weeks earlier, under an email address that wasn't mine and wasn't anything I recognized. I started looking into Victor more carefully after that, staying up later than I should have, searching old social media accounts and mutual connections. What I found didn't match the story I'd been given. He and Priya hadn't just reconnected that spring. Their messages, visible through a mutual friend's public comment thread, went back over a year, long before she'd ever mentioned his name to me at all. And in an old photo from her college years, before I'd have any reason to be in it, there was a young man standing next to her who looked enough like a younger version of me that I had to check the caption twice to confirm it wasn't actually me photoshopped into someone else's memory. I didn't confront her yet. I wanted proof, not a theory. So I drove to our branch and asked to speak with the manager directly, a woman named Carol, who'd known us for years. I told her, plainly, that I suspected unauthorized activity on our accounts, and asked her to place a discreet verification flag requiring in-person biometric confirmation for any withdrawal over $1,000, no exceptions, and to call me immediately if anything triggered it. That flag sat quietly in the system for 3 days, which is the only reason anyone knew to call me the second. Priya walked in with a man who looked exactly like me. I got to the branch in 31 minutes instead of 40, running 2 lights I probably shouldn't have. Through the glass wall of the manager's office, I could see them both seated at Carol's desk, Priya in the blue coat she wore for important errands, and beside her, a man in a jacket nearly identical to one I owned. Same build, same close haircut, a resemblance close enough that for one disorienting second, my own brain tried to insist it was somehow me sitting there, some impossible version of myself I hadn't authorized to exist. Carol met me at the door before I said a word, and walked me through what her verification process had already caught. The ID he'd presented had my name and my old employee photo from 6 years earlier, lifted, she guessed, from a company directory or an old social account, laminated onto a forged license. It matched the picture. It didn't match the biometric scan or the signature card on file, not even close, and that mismatch was the only reason $18,000 hadn't already left our account before I arrived. Priya's face, when she saw me, was a mixture I still can't fully untangle: shock, shame, and something that looked almost like relief that it was finally happening in the open. The man beside her didn't try to run. He just sat there, oddly calm, the way people do, once they already know the math isn't working out for them. I didn't need to raise my voice in that lobby. I asked Priya, quietly, how long she'd known what he was actually planning to do with that ID. She said she didn't know, that Victor had told her he just needed her there to make the withdrawal look routine, a favor between old friends helping with a business emergency, and that she hadn't asked enough questions because some part of her hadn't wanted the answers either. Carol called the police while we waited, and I stood a few feet from my wife and the man wearing my 6-year-old face on a piece of plastic, saying almost nothing, letting the flag and the mismatched ID say everything that needed saying. What we learned over the following weeks came mostly through the fraud investigation. Victor had a documented history under 2 other names, using stolen photos of men who resembled him to forge identification and drain joint accounts with the cooperation, willing or manipulated, of women he'd cultivated relationships with first. 2 other cases turned up in different states, both women who'd described the same slow build, an old friend reappearing, small favors accumulating into something neither of them fully understood until it was nearly finished. Priya's role in it stayed genuinely unclear, even to her own account of it, misled about how far it would go, but honest enough with herself eventually to admit she'd known more than she'd let herself examine, that some quiet part of her had chosen not to ask because the marriage had already started feeling like something she was managing rather than living inside. Priya and I are separated now, living in different places while both of us figure out whether 9 years of trust can survive learning that some of it had quietly stopped being mutual months before I noticed. I changed the locks the same week. I opened new accounts under new verification protocols I designed myself, obsessively, the way you do after something like this, checking balances most mornings before I've even had coffee. I sleep alone most nights now, and some of those nights are harder than others, the house quieter than it used to be, in a way that has nothing to do with anyone being busy. I don't know yet if my marriage survives what that afternoon exposed. I know our accounts survived intact, and I know exactly why, because I trusted a small, nagging inconsistency enough to act on it before I had any proof at all. Here's what that phone call taught me. The moment something feels slightly wrong, a charge, a story that shifts half a degree each time it's retold, a stranger swearing they saw you somewhere you weren't, that feeling is data, not paranoia, and it deserves to be followed all the way to the end, rather than explained away, because the answer might be inconvenient. Now I want to hear from you. Has your gut ever caught something wrong, long before you had any proof of it? Tell me about it in the comments below, and where you're watching from tonight. If this one meant something to you, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.